patriotic. It when you're young, the new experiences are always interesting. I didn't particularly enjoy the drill or the having life so regimented. However, the regimentation in some degree seemed good to me. We got up early and took exercises, and it even when it was sometimes onerous, you felt it was beneficial. And so I was glad to have been out at the camp. And the experience in the Guard, of course, was just one night a week, as I remember it, down at the Armory, where I was introduced to horses. Being a city boy, I knew nothing about horses, and for the most part, the horses had absolutely no interest in me. And it was said that the Army, there used to be a roundup and sale of horses every year at St. Louis. It was a famous event in the year for the country because we still had a great many horses that we needed then. And it was said that the Army always got the worst of the horses in that roundup, and that, of course, the worst of the horses that the Army got were given to the various National Guards by the Army. So we had an obstreperous group of horses. We always went for 2 weeks every year out on to Camp Murray for 2 weeks of concentrated military life. And I was in charge of the battery cart, which had 2 horses. I did my best to manage them, but the horses with their good horse sense recognized that I didn't know much about them. And it was very difficult to handle the battery cart when the horses really had a different idea other than the mission on which we were set. And sometimes they would run away. And I remember one time they didn't stop until one horse ran on one side of a tree and the other horse was on the other side of the tree. That stopped us for sure, I can tell you. Yes.
Can you
Yes.
tell me, when you were 15 or 16,
Yes.
what did you think about war? What did you think about, what was your opinion or your feelings about war?
Oh, 2 things about
Can you try to use my question and your answer a little bit for this one? That would be good.
Yes,
Okay.
of course, with our minds slanted as they were at that time, still thinking of the Germans as the Boche, a very denigrating term. We thought of war as a good thing in beating the enemy and as being valorous. The fact that people had to give up what they had and be ready to surrender their lives for the well-being of the country and humanity as we saw it. Now, of course, I understand that the Germans were just as good as us in that war, and I say quite distinctly just that war, because the Second World War was a very different affair.
Which war were you speaking about?
I was speaking of World War I, which was only won when the Germans discovered that the preponderant might of America had been thrown into the balance and that they would never be able to win a war against a country such as ours, drained as they were at that time of men and material.
So back to you. Before World War II, as a young man, your feelings about war was that war was necessary and
Necessary, yes, and the people who took part in it were glorious people. We esteemed the generals, with an adulation that I don't think generals get today. And the wartime leaders were sort of venerated. I know Woodrow Wilson was my first public hero, and he remains a great hero in my thinking. He was one of the most moral presidents we've ever had, and I like to think back on him.
Okay. Let's see. I think she needs to
Surely.
change the light a little bit.
Yes.
So we're around age 20 now, or I don't know. Then you went
Yes.
to the university, but you weren't really that interested in the university.
No.
So I want to know how you got from wherever that was to getting into the church, and what led that? Yeah.
Not finding the university a very productive experience, I began to think about studying someplace else, and so the idea of going to France for study sort of got a hold of me, and my family didn't think that was a good idea. So I decided that I would go to work and save money and go to France on my own. So having had some experience of sea travel, I had friends living across the street from us who owned a fleet of freighters, and I got a job as a fireman on one of these freighters, and I worked for 7 months, saving up all my wages, and at the end of that period, I got on board a ship again as a fireman, sailing from Everett back to the East Coast, and then got a very inexpensive ticket on another freighter to Belgium, and from Belgium I went down to Paris and entered the University of Paris to study. I discovered that my French was not up to this, so I went instead to the Alliance Française, which was a good place for learning French, and was there for about 3 to 4 months before realizing that I wasn't getting as much French as I should, and that was because so many people in Paris spoke English, and I was not speaking enough French. I left the university and went down to Grenoble, which is in the provinces, near the French Alps. And that was a very agreeable experience. I lived in a French pension, and we spoke French all the time. And I found the lectures at the university there much more interesting. There was particularly one lecturer, a professor of philosophy, who was also very much interested in religion. And I had found the courses at the University of Washington, which I most enjoyed, were the courses on philosophy. And he was a great follower of the most esteemed philosopher of that age, whose name, I know it just as well as I know my own, but here's where my 93-year-old mind will not help me as quickly as it should. Well, what was his name? Anyway, this philosopher influenced me very much. And living in this household of people who were mainly Catholic, it interested me that their religion was almost a matter of daily affair, which I hadn't found to be true in the Protestant world in which I had grown up. We never got busy about our religion until Sunday came around, and but these people on a daily basis were concerned, and I just got a very different impression of religion being with them. And I've often thought that maybe if I'd stayed a second year in France, I probably just would have become a Catholic. But there are aspects about the Catholic Church that I just felt I couldn't accept. And mainly the idea about the infallibility of the Pope. That was a little too much for my Protestant upbringing. And so it wasn't until later when I discovered in the Anglican Church there were many of the things that I liked about Catholicism that were present in Anglicanism without these objectionable features. I just gravitated that way, and that's how I came to be interested in becoming a priest of the Episcopal Church, which is a part, of course, of the Anglican world. And so my trip to France was really very determinative in my life, and I loved France. At that time, any free-thinking person in the world felt that they had two homes. One was their own country, and the second was France. France was open to anybody and any set of ideas that one might have.
But how did you go from not really being very religious at all to deciding that you wanted to become a priest? That I don't totally understand.
Yes. Well, I don't know that I'll ever understand it myself in the word that you used, totally. But I know that I began to, because of my interest in philosophy, it seemed to me that that philosophy ought to hold the major interest of mankind. After all, it deals with the deepest problems that we have, and the great question in those days, as it is for many people today, was: is there a God? Is there a superintending source that controls this universe in which we live, and what is our relationship to it? And isn't it strange that I can't think of the name of this great philosopher who is still mentioned in histories of philosophy?
When did he live?
Pardon?
When was
I'm talking about the 1930s now.
the 1930s?
Yes.
And what did he write about?
He wrote just a minute. almost have the French title, but
Sartre?
he wrote about creative evolution, I think. Evolution créatrice, is that it? No. Maybe it'll come to me.
But did he write about God?
He was always rather indecisive himself, excepting the professor we had at Grenoble, who knew him very well, spoke of an interview with this man who said so determinedly, Dieu existe. Yes, God does live. God is. I had a kind of a sense of reconversion when I was in Grenoble, although no one person had anything to do with it. But I just began to think again in terms of a universe that is ruled and accountable to the divinity. And it seemed to me that if this is so, that's where one ought to direct one's efforts and give one's life to support. It would mean the greater understanding of all peoples on earth if we could come to this common belief and understanding. And so when I came back, I began to inquire about seminaries, and I found the one which the Episcopal Church thought the most of, which was the General Theological Seminary in New York City, over in the Chelsea district, not too far away from the two great towers that are not standing anymore. And but at the end of my stay in France, my mother, who always liked to travel, thought that my father and she and my sister ought to come to Paris and spend 3 months traveling around Europe with me. So that's the way my stay in Europe ended.
So did you feel that becoming a priest, that you had a special mission, or you had a calling?
I felt it was a calling. I felt it was a calling to the center of things, and that whatever mission there was would develop as I was in it. And I think that's still the way I feel. Yes.
So you feel that God called you? Can you say, is that true?
I don't pretend to having heard a voice, the voice of the divinity. No, it was just the way things slowly moved ahead in terms of interest and what I would most like to do. Yes. No, I've never, this having been my experience, I've never felt any attraction to people who felt that they had had a direct summons. And my own feeling is that the approach to the Almighty, there's such a vast gap that to make pretense of this direct connection is almost a matter of effrontery. Our apprehensions of God are many and proper, but they're all somewhat attenuated in my thinking. And I suppose with my interest in history, I like in many ways that phrase that speaks of God's hand being shaped in his dealings with mankind, mainly through history. It's as we look back and appreciate the movement of men and ideas and the developments, the severances and the affiliations that develop with the problems and crises that we can best sense, mainly through moral understandings. What is the right thing, which has always been understood to be the main thing that God is interested in with relation to us, his creatures. Yes. Now, I may have been a little lame in handling all that, but anyway, that's the way I feel about it. Mm-hmm.
Do you have both? We have both channels recording for the sound. Can we have both? Oh, again, okay. Because he keeps popping when he says. So when he says like, so I'm just worried. We're just doing something with the sound.
Oh, yes.
Well, and he says like, yes.
What do you mean? Try it. You do it.
You
do it.
So how are you feeling? So it's 2:45. Should we go to 3?
Now tell me, is it 2:45?
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, let's go to 3:00.
You think you can?
Is that all right?
Yes.
I mean, I don't like to cut you short, but
No. We're doing this so that you're comfortable.
yes. Well, all right. Let's go on to
Okay.
2:45, or any time after that you think's a good point to stop.
Okay,
We'll
so
stop.
we're really today sort of talking about your childhood.
Yes.
The
Yes.
influences in your life that kind of brought you, because the next time we meet, we're going to talk about the windows.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about what motivated you.
All right.
But I think it's just to
Now,
know a little bit about you.
Here there's a white envelope on the table there. I think that may be it. No, it's a bigger one. It's quite a big one. Let's see, is this it? No, this is not it, but it's this size. And there's some pictures that were just mailed to me yesterday. Oh, I didn't show you, did I? One of the pictures. And I was leaving Honolulu. And this is a picture of myself and my mother out on a beach, and Pacific Beach in western Washington. I don't think there's anything here, maybe, but we'll quickly look it through. This was the Army, and here is oh yes, this I think you've seen. And this should be associated with what we do with one of the windows in Biarritz in France. No, that's all there is. That's another picture of the same. Yes.
So
let's just
Well,
put those.
maybe we'll use. I'll put them back in this envelope.
That's the right
and there's
one.
one
Yes.
more. Here's one more. Is this your sister?
Yes, that's my sister and
Okay.
myself in Honolulu. And,
Okay.
hmm
Okay. I guess the thing is I mean, I can ask you later, more, but maybe you don't feel that there was really anything that special about you when you were growing up, or, but maybe there is something that you would want people to know about you, and you were an adventurer, you were interested in history,
Yes.
you loved the movies.
Yes.
You became interested in religion through a very important experience in France and a
Yes.
philosophy teacher.
Yes, that's right.
Is there
yes.
anything else that you would want people to because when people see this video, they're going to see you talking about what brought you to make for the idea for these windows, for these very important shards of glass that you collected. So is there anything else about you when you were a young man, or the way that you thought, or the way that you felt?
I think the only additional point I'd like to put in now is thoughts sort of come into my head, would be, as a child, my experience in reading Hurlbut's, capital H-U-R-L-E, I think, B-U-R-T, apostrophe S, Story of the Bible. This was a retelling in readable language for children, mainly of the stories of the Old Testament, and of course the life of Christ. There were wonderful illustrations that went with this book, and in terms of religion, it sort of extended the world that I knew something about through Sunday school in the most imaginative way. I did love reading that book and looking at the pictures. The pictures illustrated the stories so well. I think it's one to recommend to all Christian or Jewish parents who wanted their children to be more familiar with the great personages of sacred writings. Hurlbut's Story of the Bible. I'd just like to include that if we can.
So that reading that made a big impression on you.
Yes, it did. Yes.
Something
Yes.
about the images.
The images had a great deal to do with it. Yes, and the actions of those involved, particularly, I guess, the more or less savage stories of the early Old Testament generals who were leading troops in battle and such.
What about those?
David especially, the remarkable story of David, and about...
What about them, that they were very savage? What was it that made an impression on you?
Well, it was... yes, who can read about Jericho, for example, without finding it exciting? The spy and all that. They're still exciting to read, but not enough people know how exciting they are, and the language that we find in our Bibles today of the Old Testament seems so stiff, and I think children especially need something like Hurlbut to reinforce their interests.
Okay. Well, is there anything else, or we'll stop for today?
All right, all
Okay.
right.
Okay, and that was
Mhm.
great. Okay. Okay. We're gonna take about 10 minutes to straighten up your room and move everything back.
Not pray too much, but I'd be glad if you could, just readjust. I think there's very little that you need to do.
But we'll do it.
Well,
And I ask you, was this okay?